Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Well, good morning, my friends, and welcome to the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator, and live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com. Thank you very much for joining us here this morning for this beautiful Tuesday edition of the show. We are ready to rock and roll and dive into the deep end with the weekly top three. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is going to be joining us this morning, and we're going to be dealing with some of the big state issues with Brad. He's going to give us his thoughts on education and the permanent fund, the business climate, and more. That's all coming up here in just a hot second. And then in hour two, I'm going to recap with some of my thoughts on some of the topics that Brad's going to dive into. And then we're going to finish up in hour two with Chris Story, the man from Homer, who's going to soothe the savage beast. He's going to give us a balm for our feelings, because our feelings are going to be hurt by the time this whole thing's over. I guarantee it. It'll be all good. So we'll finish up with Chris Story on that as well. Looking more and more like I will be taking Friday off this week, just a FYI. And so I will we'll let you know for sure tomorrow, but it looks like we'll be taking Friday off this week for a 3-day weekend. You'll have alternate programming in Fairbanks and the interior and around the rest of the state as well. So just a heads up, so you're prepared in case you have plans to wake up to me. It'll be somebody else, probably on Friday. 90% possibility. So we'll get that all said and done. All right. Well, we got a lot to cover this morning, so let's just dive right into it, shall we? With Brad Keithley, again, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, ak4sb.com is where you find him, and he joins us this morning to discuss wood ticks, lunatics, and politics. Hello, my friend. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Michael. I can always tell the weather in Homer by what shirt you have on. And today you have a long sleeve shirt on.
No, it's a t-shirt. It's a
Is
t-shirt.
it?
It's warm. It's actually warm. See, you messed yourself up this morning.
I did. I couldn't see the cutoff.
Yeah, you're all tropical this morning, so it must be nice and warm where you are. So,
well,
it's
this was just to protect against any color.
Yeah. It was any color.
Last week we didn't match on color, so this gives me a claim that any color.
During the break, I'll go get my Hawaiian shirt, and we'll match when it's all said and done. All right. So, Brad, today we're going to dive into it. We got a lot of things to cover, and we're going to start off with this article in the ADN talking about the survey of businesses. And I don't know how much money was spent on this survey. The more I look at some of these stories and I see there's whole industries that are basically out there to tell the government, to study for the government, the businesses, or there was one in Soldotna today where they're studying the light poles, and they paid $90,000 for them to go study all the light poles to see which ones need to be fixed or not. And I'm just shaking my head. But this week's, we got a conundrum. The Anchorage business set is facing a conundrum, and they just don't know what to do. Brad, give us the rundown here.
Well, this last week was the annual Anchorage Economic Development Commission presentation in Anchorage, where they have done a survey. The AEDC has done a survey of the Anchorage business community, identified things that the business community is concerned about, identified the level of confidence the business community has in the economy and the issues they see out there and the potential solutions they see to the business or they see to the economic environment. And this year's survey was not great. The headline in the Anchorage News Daily News story is "Survey finds Anchorage business confidence fell amid Trump tariffs and federal cuts." The APRN has Anchorage businesses report declining confidence in new survey. And basically, the survey showed that more businesses were concerned about the state of the economy and believe the state of the Anchorage economy, and indeed the Alaska economy, was headed on a downward trajectory than believed it was on an upward trajectory. It wasn't unanimous. There were some who believed that the economy was doing okay, but generally the level of business confidence was on a downward spiral from the standpoint of the Anchorage business community. The thing that caught my eye was one of the issues, a fairly high issue for the reason for the lack of confidence, was the state of the condition of the state's fiscal situation and the concerns that the business community has about the state's business or the state's fiscal situation, and that it's not resolved and it remains up in the air. And so the survey was not only about their concern about the state's fiscal situation, but about potential solutions. And the thing that caught my eye was the disconnect between the business community's concern about the state of the economy and their solutions to the economy, solutions to the state's fiscal situation that they voted for in the survey. The number one solution to the state's fiscal situation, a high level of concern about the state's fiscal situation. The number one solution to the state's fiscal situation was reductions in the PFD, further reductions in the PFD. We're already down to $1,000 PFD. We're already down to a 70% cut or something in the PFD. And now the business community is saying, well, the solution to the state's fiscal situation is to reduce it even further. Second behind that was reduction of state spending. Third behind that was a statewide sales tax, then a statewide income tax, and then elimination of the PFD was at the bottom, but nevertheless still got a significant share of votes, more than a marginal amount of votes supporting the elimination of the PFD. Here's the disconnect. The disconnect is they're concerned about the economy. They're concerned about the impact, primarily the impact of the tariffs, raising costs, and cuts in federal spending, reducing revenue in the local economy. But a big part of the concern about the economy is the state's fiscal situation and the unresolved nature of the state's fiscal situation. Concerned about the economy. They're concerned about the impact of all that on the economy. Yet they are voting for a solution, the reduction in the PFD, that of the alternatives has the largest adverse impact on the economy. It's like there's this fundamental economic disconnect in the mind of the Anchorage business community. Any regressive tax, because middle and lower income Alaska families, middle and lower income families generally, have a higher marginal propensity to spend. That is, the extra dollar they get, they will spend as opposed to save or invest or sort of take off the board as occurs in the higher income brackets. So any extra dollar in middle and lower income brackets tends to increase spending, tends to improve the business climate. PFD cuts are the most regressive of all the options and have the largest adverse impact on middle and income families, and so they have the largest adverse impact on the overall economy. It's just that's sort of axiomatic. That's how economics works. And so when you say that your solution to a bad business climate where you're concerned about consumer spending and you're concerned about revenue in the community and you're concerned about revenue in the pockets of consumers, when you say that's a primary concern, but you vote for the solution that has the largest adverse impact on the economy, I don't know what you're trying to get at. I mean, you're saying the situation's bad, and that you're voting, and then you vote for the solution that makes it even worse.
Well, and this shows us, I think, more than anything else, how much of a dependency state, and in this case, we're not talking about the welfare side of it. We're talking about the corporate welfare. They said they surveyed like 172 businesses. How many of those businesses are dependent on government largesse at one point or another? Government contracts, surveys, studies, maintenance, whatever. That's what it looks like to me. It looks like this is that self-licking ice cream cone of businesses that have attached themselves to government and are so dependent on it. They're not really talking about the private economy. They're talking about the public economy. That's what this whole focus seems to be about. And as long as the public economy does well, what it kind of ends up being.
Yeah, I think that's that's a good observation, and I think that is a significant part of it. I think the other part of it is when you do a business survey like this, you're doing a survey of the executives or the owners or the upper echelons of the business community. And so what you've got is what you're surveying are people in the top 20%, or people in oil, or people in other, at the top levels of other industries, who are saying, "Oh, the PFD doesn't mean much to me, and so let's cut that because it doesn't really impact me." I don't think they understand. I think they're surveying people who don't understand the impact of PFD cuts on middle and lower income Alaska families because it doesn't affect them. So they're saying, "Oh, cut that because it really doesn't affect me much," without understanding that it affects the economy a whole lot.
Right. No, I mean, and I think that's part of the problem here is that as they continue to look at it, this is a very insular, appears to me to be a very insular group of people, because overall, and they mentioned this, consumer confidence is rising steadily, but the business confidence in Anchorage specifically was declining. And I think part of that, again, is because they're dependent on that government spend, while the private economy and the consumer confidence and inflation and all those other indicators seem to be dropping. And so consumers are excited, but the business climate is not so much, especially when those businesses have built an entire business model around subsidizing themselves from government spend.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation, and the focus on the decline in federal spending as a driver to the loss of confidence is probably a good indicator of that businesses have structured themselves to take advantage of the federal spending. And when they see that federal spending declining, they have a concern about it. Those businesses tend to also be concerned about state spending or be tied to state spending. And when they see a decline in state spending or adverse impacts on state spending,
right,
constraints on state spending, they tend to be concerned about that. But to say that the solution to that is to utilize PFD cuts, the highest ranked solution to that is further PFD cuts from $1,000. Keep in mind we're already down to $1,000. Keep in mind we've already cut PFD something like 70%. When they say that the solution to that is to further cut the PFD, they're just, I mean, it's kabuki. I mean, it's suicide theater, right? I mean, they're increasing the level of the adverse impact on business as a solution to their concerns about business.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating. And I saw this chart. I think it was Must Read or somebody who had this chart up originally where they were talking about their different options, reduction in state spending, statewide sales tax, income tax, elimination of the PFD, reduction of the PFD, and the largest take of anything was that reduction of the PFD, followed closely by reduction of state spending. But I just kind of feel like that's an afterthought more than now. Nobody wants to eliminate the PFD, right? That's the last, that has the lowest. But I mean, when you functionally reduced it down to, we were at 83.17 was this year's take of the PFD for the people. 83% went to government and 17% went to the people. I mean, how much lower can you go at this point before it is essentially eliminated? It was, they're
making it into a trivial impact on the economy. I mean, the PFD at full force has the potential to be a positive impact on the economy. And again, because the marginal propensity to spend is strongest in middle and lower income families. I mean, if you have a strong PFD, you're going to have a strong spending response to that additional money coming into those families.
Right.
And so to take that money, when you cut it back, you're turning the PFD into a trivial share of family income, and you're turning it into a trivial impact on the economy. Yeah, we don't want to eliminate it because, oh my gosh, nobody wants to say we want to eliminate the PFD, but we want to trivialize it to the point where it really doesn't have any impact on the economy at the same time that our largest concern is about the economy itself.
And it just gets, the hits just keep on coming. It gets better. It gets better in number 2. We're going to continue here. The Michael Duke Show. Brad Keithley is our guest. Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 returns right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3 continues. Brad, the one that got me was the final paragraph in this story in the ADN, where they're lamenting the federal Medicaid cuts. And you really start to see the oversized impact that this has in Alaska, especially with the federal spending. $9.5 billion spent annually on healthcare in Alaska, 1/3 of that coming from Medicaid and Medicare. $3 billion spent in this state. And of course, they're already lamenting the fact that some of that stuff has been cut because then doctors may offer less services. And again, you see there's dependency because when I talk about dependency, most people think about, maybe road construction or government contracts or something like this. But there's a huge dependency sector in the medical industry as well, where they are dependent on all that state and federal spending to a huge amount. And it really is. This is the problem that we're facing. And this is kind of the theme of today. How much have we grown so dependent on government we can't even envision it? We can't even imagine that we could live without that spending.
Yeah, I remember early on in the Dunleavy administration, maybe in the road show he did after he was elected governor, where he was going to various groups and talking about his vision for cutting spending and getting state spending back under control. One of the groups he talked to was a group of doctors. And the surprising thing about that was and he talked about, cutting Medicaid as part of the overall spending cuts, cutting the state's tie to Medicaid, or the state's contribution to Medicaid, as part of the overall spending cuts. And one of the really surprising thing was the strong pushback he got from the docs. I mean, the docs, basically, the position was, yeah, spending cuts. Yes, that's how to get the state under control. But don't cut Medicaid. don't cut the federal government, or don't cut the state's contribution to Medicaid, or cut the Medicaid program. And that was, I mean, you see that all over the place, right? You see, that's what we saw in 2019 with the pushback on the spending cuts. It was, spending cuts. Yes, we got to do that, but don't cut my program. Don't cut my library. Don't cut my museum. Don't cut my reading program. Don't cut this. Don't cut that. And with the docs, it was don't cut Medicaid. I mean, the level of your point about dependency is a good one. I mean, the level of dependency on both federal spending and state spending throughout the state is significant. And to the point where to go back to, this point about PFDs, to the point where they prioritize cutting the thing that doing the thing that has the largest adverse impact on the overall economy, doing that in order to save dollars for their spending programs, dollars that they don't, when we go back to the business elite, dollars that they don't have to pay. So, hey, they don't count, right? We don't have to pay them. So we don't have to be worried about it. It's just everybody else who has to suffer the cut.
Yeah. Brian says, because a healthy workforce will produce more. That's will they really, or will they sit in their mom's basement smoking pot and playing on Xbox? I mean, that's really my question when it comes down to it. Brad, give us some good news. You doing anything fun? Give us the music scene quickly here. You got any? What are you doing?
Next up is Kansas City. I'm going to the Kansas City Irish Festival. The summer is full of Irish festivals, and I have friends who bounce from one to the next to the next. They do merch sales, and so they bounce from one festival to the next to the next to the next. And there's great festivals all around. This past weekend I had to restrain myself. This past weekend had a couple of great festivals in France, Celtic music festivals in France. I held back. I didn't go.
Didn't go. All right. Well, that's good. I'm glad to see that you at least you have some fiscal restraint. That's maybe it could be an example for the rest of us here.
It's more physical restraint than it was fiscal restraint. I just couldn't imagine getting myself over to France for a weekend and then getting myself back. So
yeah, no, that would have been kind of a brutal time. All right. Well, let's jump back into it. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Please like the show and share, follow, ring the bell.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay. We're back. We're ready. Number 2, the weekly top 3. We said it was coming. We predicted this. We said, they got the BSA increase this time around, but that was just a nice start. You could already see them lining up, and they're saying the quiet part out loud. Not only are they going to want to increase the BSA even more, now, of course, it's the inflation proofing and everything else. This comes from an opinion piece in the Daily News Miner. Brad was kind enough to shoot me a screenshot of it here. Education funding, a victory today, but uncertainty tomorrow. They're already selling the fear, Brad.
Yeah, the body wasn't even warm, or the votes the body wasn't even cold, or the votes weren't even cold from the BSA increase of the last session and the veto override. The news miner is already pushing the next round. A couple of paragraphs from that op-ed. But let's be clear, this is not, they're talking about the $200. Let's be clear, this is not a sustainable funding solution. The year's extra oil revenue gave lawmakers a fiscal space to act. The cushion may not be there next year, and without a long-term fix to Alaska's education funding formula, the base student allocation, we're likely to see the same education funding tug of war again and again. This isn't an op-ed during the session. This is an op-ed now, this week, that says, we're not there yet.
Well, wait a second. Before I want to interrupt here, because it's very obvious to me that apparently whoever's writing this op-ed for the News Miner, this is the editorial board, apparently, they don't understand how this works. Because they said, let's be clear, this is not a sustainable funding solution. This year's extra oil revenue gave lawmakers fiscal space to act, and that cushion may not be there next year. This is in perpetuity. Do they not understand that $700 increase, almost $190 million, is locked in forever in the future? They're acting like this is going away tomorrow. Do they not understand how this works?
Oh, Michael, I think they do understand. I think they're saying the $200 isn't enough. I think they're saying it needs to be more. And this paragraph is where it gives it away. What's needed is a durable funding model that adjusts for inflation and gives districts a predictable foundation. That doesn't mean writing a blank check. It means agreeing on what level of education Alaska wants to provide its children, determining what its costs, and continuing and committing to it without the annual hostage negotiation. So I think they fully understand the $200 is in perpetuity. I think they're just saying that's not enough, and we need more on top of that, including inflation adjustments on top of everything else. So as I said, the votes aren't even cold. The body isn't even cold, and we're already on to the next round. The News Miner has already taken us on to the next round. Here's a point I want to make as we go into that round. And if you have that chart, let's flip it up. I've been spending a lot of time on looking at how Alaska ranks, not in terms of spending, not in terms of per student spending, or how we rank in the nation on that. I've been looking at how we fund our spending. And I've been doing that because, again, I grew up in a situation in Illinois where the burden of funding was substantially on the local communities. And so when you were talking about school board, or when you were talking about school funding, it was a local discussion, because it was the schools are funded substantially, mostly locally. And so it was, if you want to increase spending, or if you want to start a new program, or if you want to do this or you want to do that, it was a very local discussion. There was a lot of local pushback or local support in the case of if there was a unanimity that we needed to increase spending in this area. But it was a very local discussion, which had an impact on the local school board, and which had an impact on what was going on in the schools. And it's led to a substantial amount of consolidation. When I look back at my old school district is no more, because it's been consolidated 2 or 3 times since then into a much larger school district to achieve economies of scale and achieve cost savings. So there's been a push at the local level to consolidate because of the financial situation. What we have in Alaska is the exact reverse of that. What we have is the locality saying, hey, we don't have to pay for it. We don't have to pay much for it. And so it's the state's responsibility, and we'll keep pushing the burden, more and more the burden on the state. And nobody is taking, I don't perceive that there's a lot of responsibility being taken at the local level to find cost savings, because it's always, we'll just go push to the state. We'll just go ask the state for more and more funding. So
That's the key, by the way. That's the key. They don't ever have to look for efficiencies because they know Uncle Sugar will always be there to bail them out. That's the problem.
So you don't get a lot of talk about consolidation at the local level. You don't get a lot of discussion about cost savings. You get some, but you don't get a lot because it's always, well, we'll just go ask the state for more money, more and more and more money at the state level. So I'm spending a lot of time looking at how Alaska stacks up compared to other states in terms of the percent of funding coming from local level versus state level versus federal level. And Alaska consistently, I mean, there's various surveys out there of spending. They don't all come to the same number. They're not all on the same base year. The most recent analysis isn't all on the same base year. So they're sort of spread all over Heckenback. But I mean, they do have a consistent theme. And I've taken a few of the major ones here and put them in this chart that I'm going to be using for a Friday column somewhere along the way. And you can see that consistently Alaska is ranking very low in terms of the percent of school funding coming from the local level. The Census Bureau, the census study shows that Alaska, the most recent they have is for FY23, shows that Alaska is at 22.7%, as opposed to the U.S. average is 44.7%. Alaska is about half of the national average funded by the local level. The NCES study, the most recent year is FY21. Again, you can see Alaska is in the 20% range, low 20% range, against the U.S. average in the mid 40s range. Again, Alaska is about half. The EDI study that's published in 2025, not clear what base year it's based on, but again, Alaska is at 20 some odd percent against a national average of in the 40s. Numbers are varying, but you can see a theme here. And then the last is the Alaska Deed study for FY24, the latest year for which they've audited. Again, Alaska is for local contributions in the mid 20%. So I think part of the discussion we need to be having, maybe a big part, maybe the biggest part of the discussion we ought to be having in this next round of K through 12 funding that we're talking about is increasing the burden on the local communities, increasing the incentive, to put it another way, increasing the incentive for the local communities to start pushing back on spending, to start saying, look, wait, we have to pay for a big chunk of this. So let's find efficiencies. Let's find priorities within our communities to reduce spending or to keep spending under control. As I say, in Illinois, it's led to the consolidation of a significant number of school districts across the state because they have found that they can't afford, everybody wants to have their own school. Every town and village wants to have their own school, but you find you can't afford it. And so you start looking for other ways to have schools that are affordable to the community. And in Illinois, that's led to a lot of consolidation. I think a key of this next round of school funding is starting to talk about an increase in the level of local contribution. And I know that's going to lead to a lot of pushback, but that's exactly what we want, right?
Right.
It's exactly, we want the local communities to start pushing back on increased school spending, and start finding efficiencies in the context of their communities, because they'll know best how to do it. Finding increased efficiencies and increased ways of controlling costs, and achieving efficiencies in terms of consolidation or other things within their communities, to push back on spending increases. If we don't do that, if we don't push more responsibility and more costs down to the communities, I'm afraid that the newsminer is right. We're in for another repeating rounds of pushing for increased state spending because people at the local community say, hey, let's have more. Well, and it's the state's fault we don't have more.
part of that is a conundrum too, because we've accepted these federal dollars, and part of the hook in the federal dollars is that equity component, because we have some communities that are already funding up to that federal cap, right? I mean, the Kenai Peninsula Borough was essentially funding to the cap that they were allowed under federal law. And so we're being held in amber on that component. And then this is a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison, because we've got huge swaths of the state that have no local contribution at all, right? There's no local contribution. It's all being funded by the state. So the numbers are being kind of skewed by that as well. But we've got those two problems locking us in.
I've looked at the second problem. I've got a thought on the first problem too, but I've looked at the second problem. And yes, there are big parts of the state geographically that have a limited amount of local contribution. The unincorporated borough has a limited amount of local contribution, or no local contribution. Basically, the feds are supplying the local contribution, and that is, that's an issue. But it's not a big driver in that 22%. If you look at Anchorage, for example, Anchorage is in that general area, is in the 20s. It's a little bit higher than the Alaska average, but it's still a lot lower than the national average. Fairbanks, a little higher than the Alaska average, but still a lot lower than the national average. And so we tend to overplay, I think, the impact, this disparity within the state in affecting these numbers. I think even if you look at the big districts, they're not up to the national average. They're not involving the localities as much as we do on a national basis. The first one about dependence on federal dollars and the resulting disparity test, we're the only state that's still subject to the disparity test. We're the only state that's still trying to apply the federal dollars through the state and count that as toward the state share, which is what kicks in the disparity test. And I think it's appropriate to start considering, or to consider whether that's something we still want to do, whether that's something that's important. It doesn't back out the federal dollars. The federal dollars still go in. They just don't count as part of the state's share.
Right.
And so I think that if we're focusing on getting the contribution, getting the incentives at the local level up, and increasing the incentives at the local level, increasing the involvement, increasing the funding from the local level, it's time to evaluate whether or not we still need to be subjecting ourselves to the federal disparity test.
Well, because that was the call from the legislature, right? Oh, they are all about local control. That was the whole argument. They are all about local control. If they're about local control, then up your contribution so that you can control it and be directly involved in that from now on. That seems to be the answer here.
Yeah, they're all about local control, but they're all about local control of state spending, which is sort of the worst of all worlds, because you get a body committed to pushing for increased state spending so they can have more of it at the local level without them having to raise it themselves.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top three continues. Up next, the permanent fund, the one big beautiful fund. We're going to continue with this in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, that's what I've been saying is, if a community wants to give more, if a community wants to make itself the showcase of education, they could, just fund it right. Fund it as much as you want. That should be part of it. I didn't realize that it was because of the way that they accounted for it, the federal monies, that was triggering that. I mean, so we stop that. We should stop that 100% for sure. When you look at the numbers that you threw up there, and I'll pull that chart back up real quick. But when you look at it and you see localities are spending, are contributing 40% to their community schools, and we're doing half that. In almost every survey, our local communities are only providing half of the same amount. If they were squawking up, and it would mean that the local community would be more engaged on that, because they'd be like, is this money being wasted? Or is it being spent? Are we looking for the most efficiencies? This opinion piece is so full of just, the BSA unchanged for years, the reality of running schools, the result of that unholy union is a cycle of short-term fixes and long-term uncertainty. I mean, how dare they should have to, they go on to talk about how they're forced to budget for worst case scenarios. Of course they should budget for worst case scenarios. You don't budget on the best case scenario. That's not how budgeting works. You do the best that you can do. You don't bet on the pie in the sky if come, and that's what these guys seem to be doing.
Yeah. And again, Michael, I mean, I can't stress enough again. So you go to a school board meeting, or you go to, you read about school board meetings, or you read, in the opinion pieces in the local paper about how, school boards are reacting, or school officials are reacting to the budget. It's all, the state needs to give us more. I mean, the state needs to pay us more. That we've created these lobbying organizations to go to the state and say the state needs to pay us more. The state needs to increase their contribution, and it's not even in proportion, right? The localities aren't even talking about, and we'll pick up 20 whatever odd percent of it, which is sort of our average pickup. It's no, all the marginal money needs to come from the state level. We need to be increasing the state level. We need more money, and all needs to come from the state. And so we've turned these school organizations and the localities into lobbyists for increased state contributions, because they don't have any responsibility for it.
Funded by state contributions, by the way. Lobbying arms funded by state dollars to go get more state dollars.
Yeah, and so you got no sense of responsibility at the local level to find cost efficiencies, to find cost containment. I mean, they'll give lip service to it. I read, papers from all over the state. The school boards are saying, we'll constrain spending here or something. But generally speaking, there's no drive to find cost efficiencies. There's no drive to create priorities in the local community about what we're going to fund and what we're not going to fund, what's going to get more education funding. It's like everything needs more, and we'll go to the state to get everything more, and we'll complain to the state if they don't give us more, and we'll complain about our state officials if they don't give us more. That's what we've set up. We've set up local lobbying for more money from the state. I think it's time to, if we're truly interested in getting cost efficiencies, if we're truly interested in prioritization, I think it's time to not only give more power to the localities in terms of freeing them from the disparity test, but I think it's also time to give them more cost responsibility, so that they feel it at the local. They feel this increased spending at the local community, and they feel the constraint of, no, I don't want to do it that way. I want to find other ways, or I want other priorities. We only have so much money at the local level. I want to find other priorities and other ways to constrain it.
I think it's interesting that we can already see that the verbiage for the battle lines is being set up, talking about things like predictable funding. That's the key. The predictable, that's what they want. They want this locked in so that it's predictable. And again, that's just, every dollar in the public coffers should fight against every other dollar, right? I mean, every program should be weighed and measured. Everything should have to fight against every other option that's out there, because that's the only way you keep things efficient. Otherwise, it just becomes, this bloated program. And that's what we're seeing right now. Yes, every administrator, every school district, every school board should budget for the worst case scenario. And then everything else is, if it happens the other way, it's plan for the worst, hope for the best, and all your surprises will be happy ones. That's what we need to be doing. but we're not going to, we're not going to deal with that. And yeah, we've already talked about the disparity test. Harold, welcome to the program. That's part of the problem as well, is this disparity test. But if we stop accounting for it in the way that we do, maybe we can, I don't know, maybe we can. But again, Brad, I think what we're talking about here is pie in the sky, because I don't think there's the political will to, like I said, people can't even envision that being part of the issue here.
Maybe so, Michael. Maybe it is pie in the sky. But I think if anybody feels that, if any community feels that they may be pressured more,
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. I just rudely interrupted Brad's final thought on the last topic on number two. We were talking about, I didn't think there was a political will to fix things like the disparity test, et cetera, et cetera. Brad, I'll give you the final thought on that before we jump into number three.
Oh, I was going to simply say that I think any discussion, maybe there's not the political will to increase local contribution, but any discussion about that, about the potential for increasing local contribution, and you can have more money if it comes from increased local contribution, I think that will start putting the brakes on this push for more and more and more, because local communities will start considering, well, I can't afford more. So,
right.
So yeah, if I'm going to have to pick up part of this more, then I don't want more. I want to have some constraints on spending at the local level.
Well, it's an interesting thought, and I'd love to see some discussions on it. Will it happen? Probably not. But I'd love to see more conversations around that whole idea. All right, let's move on to number three, which is a discussion that we've been having over the last 8-10 months about the permanent fund, and this push by the fund itself, people like Stedman and others who see it as a way to, I can't see it any other way, to get their hands on the cookie jar, to get their hands into the corpus. And that is this continual discussion on, quote unquote, safeguarding the permanent fund by combining the earnings and the corpus. The latest is a piece out of the Fairbanks Daily News Miner. Bart LeBon, constitutional scholar, comes forward with a piece talking about it's time to safeguard the permanent fund for good. Brad?
Well, this is this LeBon's op-ed is a pickup on a previous op-ed, a community op-ed that we discussed last week by Joshua Church, that was pushing the one account, the proposal to merge the two accounts in the permanent fund into a single account, and to sort of recapture or bring everybody up to speed. We currently have two accounts, constitutionally created two accounts. The corpus is constitutionally protected. The corpus of the permanent fund, principle of the permanent fund is constitutionally protected. The legislature can only spend from the earnings of the permanent fund. So if the permanent fund's not producing enough earnings to fund whatever the legislature wants to use the earnings for, then the legislature has to stop spending, because there isn't, under the Constitution, they can only spend from the earnings. So you only get to spend as much as the permanent fund earns. What the proposal for the one account system is to merge the earnings reserve into the permanent fund corpus, create a single account. And they say that, and the proponents say that's good, because then you have predictability. You can set the draw at 5% a year, or whatever number you pick. You can set the draw at 5% a year, and you will have a consistent stream of earnings, consistent stream of revenues, rather, coming out of the permanent fund at 5% of whatever the balance of the permanent fund is. The problem with that, it doesn't increase the protection of the permanent fund, it decreases the protection of the permanent fund. Because if you don't have earnings sufficient to fund the 5%, you can still, under the proposed constitutional amendment, they can still take the 5% every year. They can start eating into the corpus, what's previously been considered the corpus, start eating into the corpus to fund the 5%. They eliminate the constitutional protection of having the two account system, and you can only spend from the second account, from the earnings account. They take away that protection of the corpus, and open up the corpus, open a back door into the corpus for withdrawals during years in which the permanent fund hasn't earned 5%. And that's not theoretical. If you look back over the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, in the majority of those years, the permanent fund corporation hasn't earned 5% a real rate of return of 5% sufficient to fund the draw. So it isn't just speculation. It isn't just theoretical that there might be this problem. We've seen that problem occur where the permanent fund doesn't earn the level that the legislature now wants to withdraw. So when the headline that it's time to safeguard the permanent fund for good by Bart LeBon is false. I mean, it's exactly the reverse. What the one account system does is undo the safeguards that are currently in the Constitution protecting the permanent fund corpus. What's really going on is this, and Bart LeBon is not my favorite legislator. So, I immediately went to this article. I immediately went to this op-ed when I saw he authored it. What's going on is this is sort of the continuation of the people, and LeBon was in the legislature when they started doing this. This is the continuation of the people who said, "Oh, we need to continue spending, so we're going to start tapping into our savings accounts. First, the statutory budget reserve till they drained that. Then the constitutional budget reserve, which, at one time had $12 billion in it until they drained that. And then, we're going to continue spending. So we'll start draining down. We'll start cutting the permanent fund dividend because that's not important. That's not really right. Bart LeBon is a former banker, is a top 20 percenter. That's not really important. We'll start draining down the permanent fund dividend. This is the next step to give themselves a back door into the permanent fund so that they continue spending. They can continue spending even though they don't have the money. They didn't have the money when they drained the SBR. They didn't have the money when they drained the CBR, but they continued spending. They didn't have the money, so they started draining the PFD, started cutting the PFD so they could continue spending. This is the next step to open a back door into the permanent fund corpus so they can continue the revenue draw, even if the permanent fund is not earning enough to fund their spending. Going to a one account system is the exact opposite of being conservative. It's the exact opposite of constraining revenues so you constrain spending. It's opening the back door to increase revenues and increase spending.
And what kills me is that one of his comments in here, during my 4 years in state office, a number of budget amendments were proposed on the House floor to overdraw the ERA beyond an amount allowed by current law. All these attempts failed, but the only way to keep this from ever happening is to combine the funds into a single fund endowment. Nothing's going to protect you from proposing. You can't protect people from proposing to overdraw the fund. That's the thing. And even if it was set at 4.5%, which is what they're saying now, well, that's what we'll just drop it to 4.5. It'll be fine. It's a larger batch of it doesn't matter. If it's not earning 5%, you're continually eating into the seed corn. That is none of this. It's all nonsense. None of that is going to prevent people from attempting to overdraw the fund. The only thing that stopped the overdraw was the votes on the floor. But again, this is the solution. No, it's not.
Even if you overdraw the fund, I mean, let's take their nightmare scenario that they can overdraw the ERA. Even if they do that, they drain it, and then the Constitution says you stop. Their proposal, their one account proposal, says you can continue as long as you limit the draws to 5%.
Right. As long as the money's in the main account, you can draw as much as you want, up to 5% in perpetuity. And again, all you're doing is eating the seed corn. You're strangling the golden goose. And that's where we're at. All right, Brad, we got to leave it there. It's just some of these people. Back with more. Thank you so much for coming on board, Brad. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. I got more to talk about on the other side of this. You're going to want to stick around for this. Back with more in just a moment. If you got to go to work, be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you on the other side. Yeah, I mean, that statement just kind of floored me, Brad. Oh, we saw a number of amendments to propose that we're going to overdraw the earnings reserve. These attempts failed, but the only way to keep this from ever happening is to combine the two funds. No, because they'll keep doing it. There is no appetite to reduce or constrain spending, so they're going to keep doing it. And if you put the two funds together, what that means is they'll just eat into the funds.
Yep. I mean, there isn't the reason, the reason I don't get concerned about this ERA overdraw issue, because there's an absolute stop. If you drain it, you're done. There's no more money there. There's no more money to drain out of there. You're done. The permanent fund corpus is protected. Maybe then people will start looking at ways of increasing the returns on the permanent fund as opposed to the mediocre returns that we've had over the last several years. But you're done. The permanent fund corpus is protected. What Bart's suggesting is you're not done. you even if you're not earning 5%, even if you're not replenishing the amount that you're drawing every year, you get to keep going. There's no stopping point. I did a projection at one point when this first became an issue. I did a column on this and projected if you just drained, if the permanent fund kept earning about 4% and real rate of return, and you kept drawing at 5%, how many years would the permanent fund last? And it's not really a big number. I mean, you can drain that sucker fairly quick by overdrawing the permanent overdrawing earnings.
Because it compounds, right? It compounds. You cut into the earning power, so every year the earning power is less, and pretty soon it starts to accelerate, and all of a sudden it's gone.
Yep.
Jeremy Bynum's in the room. He said, well, we could just move the additional dollars from the ERA to the corpus, problem solved. Well, in one way, except for then there'd just be more of a clamor to combine the funds because there is no political will in the legislature, Jeremy. You should know this. There's no political will to reduce the size and scope of government. So they're going to look for more money. So if you do that and they stop clamoring to combine the funds, which I think that would just add more pressure to, well, then they just eliminate the PFD and then they'd institute some form of tax because there is no political will to constrain the scope of government. Brad?
No, if you want to move the ERA if you want to move the funds in the ER currently in the ERA into the corpus, you're slitting your own throat because there won't be any under the current constitutional provision. There won't be any money in the earnings reserve to use to pay PFDs. There won't be any money in the earnings reserve to use to supplement the budget. The legislature's already drained out the savings account, so you're sort of done. And I doubt that Jeremy would vote for that. But the point is this: the point is, if you want to protect the permanent fund corpus, the way to protect the permanent fund corpus is to leave the current constitutional provision in effect, because that protects the permanent fund corpus. It puts a hard stop on further drainage if you drain the earnings reserve account. If you want to have access into the permanent fund corpus, then what you do is you do a one account system so that when you set the draw is without regard to whatever the earnings are. And you can continue to draw at whatever pace you want, whatever pace is set by law. You can continue to draw that even if your earnings don't match what you're drawing out. So the way to protect the permanent fund is the permanent fund corpus, which is what the current Constitution protects and what everybody says they want to protect. The way to protect the permanent fund corpus is to keep the current constitutional provision in effect, because it puts a hard stop at the end of the earnings reserve account.
Yeah.
If you don't want to protect the permanent fund corpus, then go ahead and do the one account system and set the draw rate at something that is without regard to whatever the permanent fund is earning at any given point in time, and you can just drain that sucker on out. It's the exact reverse. What Bart LeBon and others who advocate the one account system are doing is they're saying, we really want to have a steady draw from the permanent fund sort of without regard to earnings. We've seen the last few years that the Permanent Fund Corporation hasn't been achieving 5%. And so we've seen the earnings reserve drained. So we really want to have a way of accessing the permanent fund corpus, but we don't want to say that because we know people will rebel against that. So let's back into some argument that we can use that justifies going to a one account system. And they backed into this made up argument about draining the earnings reserve account and not having money.
This is a self-inflicted wound too, right? I mean, because Bert Stedman and company and everything else, they moved $8 billion over the last 10 years into the corpus from the earnings reserve. That money was sitting there in the earnings reserve and they could have had access to it, but they did this intentionally to kind of foster this environment of, now we're out of money. We have to tap into the corpus. This is, and of course, it goes back to the predication also that the permanent fund is not earning what it should. So, it's a it's a hot mess. It's a hot mess. All right, Brad.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The earnings reserve the permanent fund should be earning more. And so we would have less of this problem about the earnings reserve being drained because we would have more earnings. And we would have more in the earnings reserve. That's sort of a separate issue, though. This issue is really about protecting the corpus. And if you really want to protect the corpus, the current 2-account system does that because it creates the hard stop at the end of earnings. That's it. You're done.
Yeah.
What Bart and others want to do is they want to create a backdoor into the permanent fund.
All right, Brad. Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming on board.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the great state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the show. Hour 2 of the big radio broadcast. If you're just joining us, we just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets and the weekly top 3. Lots of stuff kind of unpacked and discussed during the last hour. If you missed it, you can go back and you can find it and listen to it on the podcast, which will be available later this morning, anywhere where you find great podcasts, including Spotify, which is probably one of my favorite places to get podcasts, is on Spotify. But you can you can find it and go back and listen to it and take a look at it. Or if you want to see the charts that Brad had up, you can go back and watch it on YouTube or Facebook or Rumble. All right. So my thoughts, my thoughts on this are as follows. I mean, starting off with the segment number 1. Okay, starting off with segment number 1. Of the last hour, where Brad talked about number 1 of the weekly top 3, the conundrum faced by the Anchorage business set, right? This is from the opinion piece or the news piece from Alex DeMarban in the ADN, where it talks about survey finds Anchorage business confidence fell amid Trump tariffs and federal cuts. And this is the Anchorage Economic Summit luncheon that took place last Wednesday. They all sat down in a big room, and they pulled the study out, and they started talking about how all these problems were coming from the lack of federal funding, the federal cuts, the tariffs, and everything else. And you can go through there's actually a pitch deck here from the slides that they put forward here. But what was most interesting to me was on page 7 of this pitch deck, they have the long-term fiscal stability. So they asked respondents, and there was 172, if I'm not mistaken, 172 businesses that participated. Yeah. Online responses from 172 Anchorage area businesses and organizations. So it's not just businesses, it's businesses and organizations responded to this. And so they asked them for long-term fiscal stability in the state. What is the solution? What is the solution? Methods to address the state's budget challenges. Okay. And so there were 6 choices total. Do we reduce the PFD? Do we reduce state spending? Do we institute a statewide sales tax? Do we institute a statewide income tax? Do we eliminate the PFD, or do we institute some other kind of broad-based statewide tax, be it a head tax or so? I mean, I don't know what exactly it would be, but some other broad-based tax. These businesses collectively and historically have always come back with number 1 in the queue: reduce the PFD. That is, I mean, it's almost always reduce the PFD is almost always number 1. Now, in 2022, reducing state spending was up there. Reducing state spending was up there quite a bit. They said that was by 5 points. We should be reducing state spending. But in a lot of these challenges, and they've been doing this study for 5 years, this survey for 5 years, reduction of the PFD is almost always in the top 1 or 2. And this really made me, as I looked at this and realized, okay, so there's no political will to spend or to reduce spending. Although there is, interestingly enough, there is a much higher appetite. There has been a much higher appetite in the past to institute a statewide sales tax. In 2021, 74% wanted to reduce the PFD, 73% said reduction in state spending, and 70% said a statewide sales tax would be the answer. But overall, what this tells me, because again, this comes back to state budget challenges, is that we've got an entire group of people. We've got an entire, of the 172 businesses and organizations. I don't know what kind of organizations they queried, but 172 of them, they really don't want to address the main component here, which is the spending. They're okay with a statewide sales tax. They're okay with a reduction in the PFD. Now, the elimination of the PFD, that's down to them, because again, they like the idea of it, but reducing it down to a couple $100 a year, they'd be okay with that. This is how much of a dependency state we've created. And I was just thinking about it when Brad was talking here in the last hour. I was just thinking about all the different areas. When we think about, and we say dependency state, and, on the one side of the spectrum is the, kind of the welfare state, right? So we've got Medicaid, we've got SNAP and food stamps, we've got Section 8 housing and, and government benefits for people, that's on the one side. But on the other side, the one that we don't talk about very much is the corporate welfare, where we've got these businesses that are so dependent on government contracts and government largesse that they they will fight tooth and nail. We saw this during the PFD debates. Remember when GCI spent like $2 million trying to convince us that the POMV draw and that the dividend needed to be taken to spend for government? They spent $2 million. Why would a private entity do that? Well, because they get tens of millions of dollars of government contracts. And if the government runs out of money, or the government has to go in, has to make some cuts or go into an austerity time, they would feel the pinch. So yeah, it was a good investment for Ron Duncan and company to spend $2 million to try and convince us that we didn't need our PFD, that it should go to the state. So that's a prime example. The other one is the road construction, right? The contracting companies who are contracted by the state to build roads or build facilities or things like that. They build huge parts of their business models in being surrounded and tapping into those government contracts. They also would be okay with a reduction in the PFD. You've got the education industry, which is wholly dependent on government spend, whether it's at the federal, the state, or the local level. And they damn sure don't want to see any less money. They want, as that opinion piece showed, they're already setting up the fight for the next battle in setting up an even higher BSA with an escalator built in, with an automatic price increase built in every year. And then we talked about it and touched base on it as well. The Medicaid, Medicare, the medical community is dependent on all that government spend. Well, they just may, what was the comment? They may reduce the less beneficiaries for Medicaid could lead to higher cost and healthcare premiums, and federal cuts could force affected healthcare providers to become more selective about the services they provide. Without the government spend, we just couldn't do it. So yet we have another industry that has become so dependent on that. Again, this is why one of the legislators walked up to Mike Shower or whatever and basically said, oh, well, the government, the public sector spend is fine. That is the economy. That's part of our problem. It's not just what conservatives like us would think of as welfare. Again, food stamps, Section 8, Medicaid, all that kind of stuff, the benefit payments. It's on the other side, the corporate cronyism, the corporate welfare, where they will fight tooth and nail to take that money away from you in some form of taxes, whether that's the taking of the PFD, whether that's a state income tax or a state sales tax. They're all fine with that as long as the money keeps flowing to their businesses. And that's the kind, we've got a two-edged dependency state. I mean, one third of all the citizens are on some form of government assistance in this state. The majority of it is Medicaid, right? Like 275,000 people in the state of Alaska are receiving some form of Medicaid benefits. That is not sustainable. What happens when the federal dollars dry up? Because they will eventually dry up. And if Donald Trump gets his way, it'll dry up sooner than later. Can the state afford to, again, $9.5 billion spent annually on healthcare in Alaska? 1/3 of that is coming from federal spending. 3.2 billion dollars a year. Can the state afford to pick that up? No. Remember, they were talking about cutting $500 million out of the Medicaid program, and the sky was falling because we don't have an extra $500 million laying around to backfill that hole. What we need is a group of legislators who can acknowledge that and work towards a solution of reducing the size and scope of government. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. I mean, I've been fighting this for 25 years. It doesn't mean that I'm going to stop squawking about it, but 25 years, and we get somebody in there and we think that they're going to be great, and then they get subsumed by the pod people, right? It's like the body snatchers. I mean, oh, yes, of course. Yes, of course, we have to protect that spending. And you get folks like Bart LeBon in there who this opinion piece from LeBon is just astonishing. I mean, how dumb do you think we are? And I'm specifically talking about, this was number 3 of the weekly top 3 that Brad was just talking about, which is LeBon's article in the Fairbanks Daily News Miner, talking about how it's time to safeguard the permanent fund for good. And one of the examples that he says is, during my 4 years in state office, a number of budget amendments were proposed on the House floor to overdraw the ERA beyond an amount allowed by current law. Okay, you might say, well, wait, how is it, but again, the legislature makes the law, right? So they can bust their own statutes. A judge has already decided that. I mean, they're doing the same thing with the permanent fund formula. That's law as well. Now you got 2 conflicting laws. The judge said, well, you're the legislature, you can decide. So they can create amendments that propose to draw more than allowed by current law. He goes on to say, all these attempts failed, but the only way to keep this from ever happening is to combine the principle of the ERA and the permanent fund into a single fund endowment. That's like saying, I keep bouncing checks. So what I really need to do is I really need to tie my checkbook into my retirement account. That's essentially what they're saying. I've got money put away for my retirement, which I really can't touch, but I keep bouncing checks. So what I really need to do is to connect my checkbook to my retirement account, and then I could spend as much as, if I overdraw, it's no big deal. That's it. That's what they're doing. Because if they start to tap into the permanent fund, the corpus itself, there will be no future. Because it will start, because again, it's compounding, right? So if you take away 1% of the overall fund balance in a given year, it has that much less earning potential. Then the next year you do it again, and the next year you do it again, and all of a sudden you're compounding and you're eating into the earnings reserve. So every year it returns less and less, and it just creates this doom loop. But this is their answer. So between the dependency state and this self-destructive behavior, and I don't know, I think most of these people would be like, well, I'm leaving the state anyway when I retire, so it's fine. Those of us that are planning on staying, we've got to live with this. We've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to get this through to the Alaskan people. But again, we've created a dependency state so that it's only the people in the middle who are being squeezed. The people on the one side who are receiving all the welfare type social safety network benefits are on the one side, the corporate cronyist and the corporate welfare people are on the other side. And it's the middle Alaskans who are really not connected to the public economy, who are not really, they're the ones that are getting squeezed. It's astonishing, but this is where we're at. All right, we gotta fly here. We're going to continue, and then Chris Story is going to come in at the end to soothe our nerves. We'll be back. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Sorry, I got a little worked up there. All right, let me go here. Going backwards here to the top of the hour. Maybe we should get the spending spree under control first, says Jeannie. Yeah, I mean, that would be probably a good call, right? Maybe you should stop the bad spending habits before you dump another pile of money onto the coffer. Yeah. And yes, Harold, I agree. If the fund had been managed like most, the fund would be over 200 billion. I think 140 billion is the numbers that Brad came up with. But yeah, somewhere between 140 and 200 billion. If it had from the start, yeah, I definitely think it would be over 200 billion. Don't forget, we need an hour to discuss why those who shouldn't have voted with the majority on those vetoes will. Yeah, we'll get to that tomorrow. I've got the article up right now. We'll get to that tomorrow, Miguel. It's going to take a whole hour for that one, for sure. Jeremy Bynum says, I wasn't saying move the whole ERA. I'm talking about the additional dollars in the ERA. We leave the amount needed for the current year fiscal draw, move the excess, and that prevents an overdraw. Alternatively, the excess ERA could be moved to the CBR, requiring a 3/4 vote to use. I mean, I'm not opposed to that, Jeremy. But again, remember, the permanent fund has not earned 5% over the last, for the majority of years over the last 8 years, they haven't earned 5%. Now, that would be an effective cap on government. It would be an effective spending cap if they didn't take the whole PFD and then add taxes on top of that. That's part of the problem. Willie says, I like listening to Brad. Today it took me back to Tiffany Zulkowski. We have to take your PFD to save the PFD. That would be the $8 billion from the ERA into the corpus. Right. Such a novel idea, says Terry. Reduce spending. Yeah. Frank said he could tell that there were more organizations involved in that survey than businesses. Oh, man. Let's see. Can we talk about the amount of money? Let's see, Frank. Parents like that. DOT drives that roads are largely federally funded. That's why the unions want the PFD money also, to keep their union and workers employed. Yeah. Education industrial complex uses government money to demand more government money, and we let them. Yeah. Money's one hell of a drug. That's right, Brian. Are they fine with 100% out migration, which will mean where will they find that money then? Well, again, that's the doom loop we talked about previously. If they do institute some form of tax and the size of government continues to grow, you'll eventually create that loop where people will start migrating out because they can't afford to live here anymore, which spreads the tax burden on a smaller pool. And that in turn will force more people, because the tax burden has to go up. And that in turn will force more people. And then it's that self-licking ice cream cone of destruction. Kevin McCabe says, yes, as long as we continue to increase the BSA so the school districts don't lose any money and they can continue the jobs program, we give it to them. Well, and it's going to be even more. I mean, it's going to be even more. That's what this education funding thing goes on about. I'm just scrolling through some of the comments. Add to that the ineffectual permanent fund management, and you could see the acceleration of the death spiral. Yeah. Maybe we should, Rick just said, maybe we should start Chris as soon as Brad leaves. Maybe. You know? All right, here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
Okay, welcome back to the big radio program. Tuesday edition of the show. Chris Story should be coming on shortly to share with us something positive. Something positive. Tomorrow on the program, we're going to go through and go over the list of Republicans who voted to override the governor and why their stated reasons for overriding the governor. And I know Jeremy Bynum is in the chat room today. Jeremy, I'd love to have you on the program to talk about the session as a whole and also to talk about this vote as well. Because we haven't really had a chance to talk. So I know Jeremy Bynum from Ketchikan is in the chat room this morning. So Jeremy, if you want to, if you would like to appear on the show, and we'd love to have you, please send me an email, me@michaeldukeshow.com. And we'll get you on the schedule this week. But tomorrow we're going to go through all the different, votes and who voted for what and why they voted to support, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be I think a full hour of discussions there. Also, it was official yesterday. Adam Crum finally filed his letter of intent to run in the governor's race. That makes it 8 at this point. He said Monday that he went fishing with his family over the weekend and decided that he was ready to run for governor. And he's ready to go. He said on Friday before he went off, he said that he was going to soon be sharing a vision that puts Alaska first in every decision we make. I just want to know, does he have a fiscal plan? That's what I want to know. Does he have a fiscal plan? Now, he joins an already crowded field, right? Nancy Dahlstrom, Click Bishop, Edna DeVries, Matt Hailala, Shelley Hughes, James Parkin, Bernadette Wilson, and Lisa Murkowski. Again, everybody's wondering, will she or won't she? I don't think she will, but I've been wrong before. And we'll see. Again, Adam Crum, not a name that we know. I mean, really, we know him from the administration. We knew he took a lot of heat during the COVID thing when he was at the HSS, but not a really well-known name out there. What does it mean? I don't know. That progress poll that came out here, we were talking about yesterday or day before, yesterday, I guess, because yesterday was Monday, had him at 4%. And then Treg Taylor, we're still waiting for Treg Taylor to throw his hat into the ring. He was at 3%. So we'll have to see what this is all about and how hot and heavy this race is going to be. But we'll be bringing him on the program to talk about that as well. All right. I want to go back again to the weekly top 3. And we're going to talk about number 2 now, which is the education funding. Now, I told you this. I said they're gonna do their victory lap, and then they're gonna immediately start into the next round of funding, and they're gonna continue to try and push for more school funding, because this is just not, the $700 increase is just not enough. 180, maybe Kevin can let me know in the chat room. It's $184 million, I believe, is the number for that $700 increase on the BSA. I think that equated to $184 million in spend this year. Kevin can correct me, or Jeremy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that's it. Right at the $184 million. But it's just not enough. It's not a windfall. It's a reprieve, according to the Daily News Miner. But again, this News Miner article, and I feel like somebody at the NEA sent them a thing, and they just chat GPT'd it. You know what I mean? They just rewrote it. There's a lot of M dashes of M dashes in here. And if you know anything about M dashes and you know anything about AI writing, there's a lot of M dashes in this article. That's all I got to say. But this is the kicker. Let's be clear. This is not a sustainable funding solution. We just added $184 million to our budget every year moving forward. On top of this puts the BSA in the $5,700 range per student. And that's without the formula and the escalators and everything else. This is not a sustainable funding solution. This year's extra oil revenue gave lawmakers fiscal space to act. That cushion may not be there next year. This is so schizophrenic, this whole commentary here. The money has been put into the base student allocation. There will be there will be no debate on the $700 increase next year. That's said and done. That's locked into the formula. There will be no debating. There will be no pulling it out. It is there in perpetuity. It's gone. I mean, that is locked. We have just permanently increased the annual budget of the state by $184 million with nothing else added, just that one line. So this idea that this is from this year's extra oil revenue and that cushion may not be there next. What are you talking about? You just got a $700 increase. But what do they need? Well, you know what they need. They need more. That's what do you need? More. That's what they need. More. And without a long-term fix to Alaska's education funding formula, the base student allocation, we'll likely see the same education funding tug of war again and again. This is the precursor. This is where it comes down to we need more. Now, they go on to talk about how Fairbanks has done everything they can. They've stretched every dollar. They've closed and consolidated schools. Despite declining enrollment, costs continue to rise, which tells me that that the enrollment is declining. Your entire business model is based on a per pupil funding. Then you need to make some major changes. They closed and consolidated schools and tightened staff and cut back programs, often to the frustration of parents and staff. I'm so sorry that there's not enough money to run the programs. Maybe you should do better with the budgeting, or explain to them that this is what's going on. Maybe Brad's right. Maybe we should find some way to bolster the local contribution. This whole thing. This brings us to the disconnect between the state's flat BSA, unchanged for years, and the reality of running schools. Now, again, you notice that they never talk about the one-time funding that was done in the majority of those years. Hundreds of millions of dollars. The one-time funding that was done over the course of a number of years. They never mention that. They just mention the flat BSA funding. The result of that unholy union is a cycle of short-term fixes and long-term uncertainty. Administrators are forced to budget for worst-case scenarios. Teachers work in an overcrowded classroom haze. What's needed is a durable funding model that adjusts for inflation and gives districts a predictable foundation. That's the word we're going to hear a lot here in the next year and a half, 2 years. Predictable funding. That's what we're going to, because they want to know how much they're going to have so they can spend right up to that and then ask for more. We know that the projections are going down. We know that the enrollment is declining. We know that their funding model is based on a per pupil ratio. So if you know that, and you know that it's predicted to continue to go down, you have to budget for the worst case scenarios. Nobody's budgeting on best case scenarios anywhere. But that's what they want. They want that predictability. All right, I can't do this anymore. I got to go. I've run a bit long here, so we're going to continue. Chris Story is up next. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We're back right after this.
Your mental suppository. The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. I ran a little long there. I meant to stop like 3 minutes ago, but I didn't. All right, Chris Story. The man from Homer is waiting in the wings with us right now. Hello, sir. How be you? How are you doing? Chris, can you hear me? I see he has, I see he's talking to, I see that he's unmuted his mic. Let me see here. No. Can you hear me, Chris? We're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. Probably going to have to do this the old-fashioned way, aren't we? Because there's a setting, I'm sure, Chris, it's probably a setting on your microphone settings where it's trying to pull the audio. You need to, I could walk him through it, but let's see what we can do here. Let's see if I can get this going on here. All right, Chris, I'm going to call you. You're using your phone. You're using your phone. Oh, same as before. Okay, that's weird. Why don't you try and reconnect, Chris, because I can't hear you. I see your microphone's unmuted, but I can't hear you. So I don't know what's going on, but let's reconnect and we'll try that. We'll try that again. All right. Throwing the yellow flag on that statement, MD. Remember the Parnell administration? I don't remember which flag you're talking. I don't know which statement you're talking about, but we'll go. Chris, can you hear me? Well, that's disappointing. Hold on a second here. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can fix Chris. How about that? Chris, try again. No, that's working. How about that? Chris, are you there? Okay. One final chat. Chris? No. Okay. Well, you know what? I'm going to call you, Chris. Let's do it the old-fashioned way. We'll just do it the old-fashioned way here. See if we can get this going on here.
You son of a nutcracker.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but it wasn't.
All right.
It wasn't working. Wasn't working.
Here he is.
Here you are. All right, you're ready to go. I'm ready to go. We're 2 minutes out. How you been, my friend? How are things going?
Fantastic. Never better. On top of the world. I'm improving.
Okay. Those were all just affirmations. Really didn't really tell me anything, but that's okay. I love it. That's such a great thing.
I'm alive. No complaints.
You're alive. Yep, we got it all. We got it all. We got to all do it. All right, I'm going to put you on hold for a second. I'm going to be back to here and say I got to go back and kind of read through some of the comments here. How much money has the state taken out of the PFD now? Well, that's a good question, Chris. Since 2017, so what is that? 8 years now. This will be the 8th year. This next permanent fund dividend, and they have consistently taken at least half of the permanent fund every year. And the permanent fund has been in the $3,500 range every year. So figure that they've taken probably about $2,000 a year for the last 8 years. This upcoming one will be the 8th year. So $2,000 a year for the last 8 years, about $16,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state. That's roughly it. The never-ending funding. Let's see, because schools the major that's why Russia wants it back. I'd be interested to see if Dunleavy gets Trump to endorse Crumb. Well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Glad to see. I'm using the M-dash. I was using M-dashes back when intelligence was real and organic, said Brian. Yeah, I get you. All right. We accounted for loss of enrollment, says Melissa. Well, yeah, but I think we need to really dig deeper, don't you, Melissa? We should be planning for the worst case scenario, not the best case scenario, and that's where we're at right now. Okay, we're about to rejoin the radio. Here we go. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Chris Story's our guest. Let's do this thing.
Chris Story, the obnoxiously positive and sometimes hilarious man from Homer, joins us every week to talk about pottery, positivity, and how not to become a nihilist. We're looking at you, Eric. It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Okay. Welcome back to the program. We're continuing now. Chris Story, our guest, coming in to give us the good news, the positivity, the life coaching lesson. What are we calling it, Chris? Is it just positivity? How would you characterize our moments every Tuesday morning?
Living on top of the world. Why not?
Living
born to live on top of the world.
Born to live on top of the world. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's not exactly what I was looking for, but that's okay. That's what it's all about. So
you can call it whatever. Look, it's one of those things that I just look forward to these conversations, Michael. If you want to call it motivation, my concern is that we label it something and then people go, oh, it's just about positivity.
Right.
In my way of thinking, this is actually a conversation between two two people trying to figure out life, and we're all in the same boat, and I have a couple of ideas and then bounce them off of you.
Sure.
And sometimes they break and sometimes you break me.
Right. Well, that's true. Over my knee. That's but you're right. You're right. Maybe it shouldn't just be pigeonholed into the positivity, whatever. It's always a great conversation. I always enjoy it, and it always calms me down, especially when I'm agitated about something. So I appreciate that. So, Chris, what is your topic for today, my friend? What's on your mind? What do we want to talk about?
Myths. And I've been thinking a lot about myths lately. I was reading a book on selling and kind of the difference between sales techniques of 50 years ago and then now more modern approaches towards persuasion and helping people solve problems. And so anyway, I was reading through a list of myths, and I was thinking, there's a real myth, I think, in a personality culture we live in today, the myth of mirth, that some people are just born happy. Some people wake up just in a good mood and on top of the world, like that obnoxiously positive neighbor you've got that's whistling on the way to work, and you're just kind of dragging yourself, knuckles dragging and trying to get a cup of coffee. So I wanted to address the myth of mirth. Is joy, is that zest for life that some people just happen to have every day at 5 a.m. Is that something you're born with? Is it a rare gift that is just bestowed upon some people at birth? Or is it a skill that you can adopt at will? Is this something you can train yourself to become more joyful, happier, find more meaning where you are with what you've got? So the myth of mirth.
That's a good question, because we do know, I've met people, and you're sickeningly positive all the time, which is great for me, because sometimes I have a tendency to get into the more realism phase of my life than the positive phase of my life. But there are people out there that we've all met that are, sickeningly sweet and positive. And there are people, the Pollyannas of the world. And then there are the people that are the human Eeyores of the world as well, So did they put themselves in that position? Are they worsening it? Did they start off in the middle and then work their way from one end to the other? I don't know. What say you?
Let's just take the idea of a morning person. Some people consider self-described morning people. Others, again, just do not like the morning. Don't talk to me until I've finished this cup of coffee and maybe the next one kind of people. And that's fine. You can just know who you are. I think identifying what comes natural to you is okay. I don't think you have to embrace it and be a jerk about it. But I think if you just identify what's your tendency and then what can you do about it and with it. And I think working with it is sort of like in judo, you work with the energy of your opponent. If the opponent you're not a morning person and you're just not happy in the morning, that doesn't preclude you from establishing a morning routine that will help you drive your day rather than you being driven by your day. You can set up a morning routine. You can study the routines of other people that have done what you want to do, have the attitude you want to have. They've got the success or the accomplishments that you'd like to have. And what did they do? There's a whole book called Daily Rituals, and it's about morning routines, and it's about people's lives, how they set them up through history, people that you know and admire from Da Vinci on down. What did they do? How did they do it? So how does somebody you admire treat the morning? Do they just wake up at the 11th hour and then rush out the door with a cup of coffee spilling on their suit and tie? Or do they get up early intentionally, even if it doesn't come natural, and do a certain set of routines that will help set up the day? So you needn't be a morning type person to take advantage of the morning. And I think the same thing for the guy who skips his way to work and whistling, like I said, down the driveway. That may come natural to that person, and it may not come natural to you. But that doesn't mean you can't adopt a couple of those ideas to find more meaning where you are with what you've got in your work. Can you show up in a way that would put other people first and potentially change your disposition? I think it really comes down to one sentence formula put out by Zig Ziglar in the late 1970s. And he said the same phrase throughout the rest of his life, which is, you can have anything you want in life if you'll help enough other people get what they want. So
Right.
If you focus on helping other people get what they want, I promise you, you will feel more mirth. And you can it's a funny word. It's an odd word, but I needed something that alliterated with myth. So I picked the myth of mirth. And as such, though, when you start thinking about what does mirth mean, it means joyful, amusement, gladness, laughter. So why not? Why not have some of that in your life?
The myth of mirth. I was thinking the hallucination of happiness, but I mean, what you do, you boo. That's what I'm talking about.
Boo.
But no, you're right. I mean, for years I did this show from 4 to 6 p.m. Right. So it was evening for me, but, and I wasn't always a morning person. And then I, of course, had to start getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to, and so it's just one of those things where it's habit force, right? It's habit force. You got to force yourself to go to bed to get enough sleep to be able to do it. You got to sit on the edge of the bed and pump yourself up a little bit and chat and think about what your day is going to be like. But no, I don't think anybody just rolls out of bed and is automatically chipper. Some people have more of a positive disposition than others, but it's a work in progress, right? It's always a work in progress.
I adopted a routine of Dr. Wayne Dyer. He would get up every day and say, thank you. Just 2 words. Thank you. And I adopted that years ago, and it makes a huge difference because, again, you consider me to be a positive person, and by and large, I am. I pretty much wake up in a good mood unless something's gone drastically wrong during the night. I wake up pretty much as I sound here with you. This is not an act. It really is. I'm a very positive person. Okay. Still, I adopted something that would set my mind on the right track because I might have been dreaming about something or worrying about something in the night or wake up thinking about something, a problem I haven't solved yet. So I purposely adopted that routine of saying, thank you. And I do that every single morning and a half for many years after I heard Dr. Wayne Dyer talking about that. I'm like, you know what? His disposition is one I admire. I'm going to adopt that and see how I feel about it. And so great artists steal somebody else's idea or mentality and see if it doesn't make a difference if you adopt it for a while. And you have to implement it time and again, and then go through a list of things you're grateful for. So I say thank you. And as I'm making my way out into the front room, I begin to think about things that I'm grateful for, from my health to the people in my life, what I've got, who I've got, what I'm going to be doing that day. And as simple as grateful for little Tallulah, who's always at my heel as I'm coming out in the morning. She does a full body wag. She doesn't just wag her tail. Her whole body is wagging. She's so happy to see me. And that sets my morning off with a great start also. But just having routines that don't be afraid to adopt somebody else's. Look around you. Find 3 things you're grateful for this morning or when you get to work and that idiot you work for is looking at you. Just find 3 things you're grateful for about this job today. And that idiot, by the way, might be looking back in the mirror if you're self-employed. But still, find 3 things you're grateful for about what you do, who you get to help. And remember Zig's 1-sentence admonition. It's a way of life. Help other people get what they want, and you'll get what you want.
And that could be applied to anything. I mean, I know that your goal, especially with like the Backyard Millionaires, to help other people become financially successful. That's one of your helping tools.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody, I mean, if you work at a grocery store, you could help people get get their groceries across, you're helping people live their life. I'm helping businesses with advertising. I'm trying to help them to succeed and get positive cash flow and be successful businesses. If you're an engineer, you successfully built or designed something, you're always trying to help somebody. It could be applied to anything. This is not kind of an amorphous kind of just you're helping people out of their doldrums. You can help people with some of the most basic things in life. 1 minute, by the way.
And just seeing people and saying, I see you. You don't say literally, I see you, but literally making someone be seen, making someone feel that they matter that is meaningful. That is really meaningful. If you can take in just 2 minutes today and make somebody feel important, that as though they matter, and you see them and you listen to them, you'll make a difference in that person's life. And then that will just begin to multiply and dispel the myth of mirth, that you needn't be born a mirthful, happy-go-lucky person to adopt the habits of the happy people in your life.
That's right. Pollyannas aren't born, they're made. just like human Eeyores. Oh, I'm just so yeah. No. Get happy. Don't worry. Be happy, right? That's what we need to be doing. Chris Story, the man from Homer. I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for coming on board and joining us. As always, it's great to talk with you. Thanks for being part of the show.
Michael.
I appreciate it. Out of time. All right, Chris. Can I make a comment, Chris? Just talking about people and your work.
Yeah.
I appreciate all that you do and the work that you're trying to do in helping other people and everything. But I do find it interesting, and you can comment on this quickly here. I notice, because one of the things about being on the internet along with the radio is that I can see how many people are viewing or watching or listening at any given time on the internet side of things, right? And it's interesting that when I bring you on, and to me, this is an integral part of my week. I need this. I want to talk with you. I want to put my mind right. I want to get my thoughts on those kind of rails. But it's interesting to watch. I could see the chat room like empty out. Like, we could lose half our listeners or viewers in your segment. And I don't know why. Is it that people, and I don't know if it's people just, they feel like they're all set. They don't need, positivity or life coaching or whatever. Or if it's just, I think some people are like the touchy feely, I don't know. It's interesting to see, because I would think for me, this would be the point where I would be excited to see half again as many people join the chat room versus people leaving. And I don't know why people want to avoid kind of that positivity. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, don't mistake the fact that it could just be me. It could be the delivery. It could be they don't like our friendship, or they're envious of our friendship. And no, I'm kidding.
True.
But no, seriously, It could just be a total cult of personality thing. Like, oh, this guy's an idiot. I had one guy attack me on Facebook for the way I said Homer, Alaska, on top of the world radio, live in Homer, Alaska. He's like, I can't stand the way you say Homer, Alaska. I'm like, okay. What I've learned over the years, and I know you have as well in this business, I'm not for everybody.
Sure.
I don't want to say something that is so ubiquitous that it's for everybody. I'm talking to one person at any given time. When we broadcast, you and I both probably would agree on this. So we're really just talking to one person. And so I learned a long time ago that I'm not for everybody. And so for 18 years now, I've been talking to just one person in my mind, and that person, I'm going to make a difference in that person's life. And if that means 98% of the other people are kind of like, it's not really for me, that's okay. It's for that one person. And that today might be you, or tomorrow could be that guy over there. So yeah, I'm not sure, other than to say there are some people that show up on the internet. I think specifically, I hear from a lot of people that they enjoy listening to you and I only hear that from the people that are on the radio. In other words, I think people that are driving, this is part of their daily commute. They happen to be getting towards work around 8 o'clock, and they listen to us. And I've never, of course, anybody who would tune out wouldn't tell me that probably.
Sure.
But a lot of people tell me that. And so I think you have a captive audience. They're on the radio for the duration of their commute. Whereas on the internet, like, oh, I've heard what Story's got to say before.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to go over here now. I'm going to go check this thing out over here because, I've heard that before. It's going to be the same old thing. And truthfully, they're not wrong. It's a variation on the same thing.
Right. Well,
you're personally responsible for your life. You've got the opportunity to do and create and have anything you want. And sometimes it's just not for everybody. So I know you and I don't worry about that, but it is an interesting observation.
Yeah, I mean, nothing new under the sun. We're always rehashing, old parables or stories or anything. It's always a different spin, but we're always trying to find that way to do it. I can't believe the guy didn't like the way you said Homer, Alaska, because I mean, you just said,
he's like,
it's
okay.
He's like,
of all the things I say that you want to criticize, fine.
Well, I mean, because I could criticize. I mean, you don't know how to say the word huge. Because it's an H, not a Y. You're like, it's huge. And I'm just like, there's an H in there, Story. Come on, there's an H in there. Yeah. Anyway, we could complain about
wow. Okay. This is great. I'm going to have to go find somebody to build me up after this. This is fantastic. Good thing I have a little bit of mirth left over.
It's a good thing that we could poke fun and do it. But I, as I said earlier, am always appreciative of you. I look forward to this segment every week. I don't care if it's just you and me and nobody else shows up and everybody turns their radio off. It doesn't matter to me because I want to hear what you have to say. I think it's important. So anyway, Chris Story, thank you, my friend. It's good to talk with you. Thanks for being part of the show today. We'll see you next week. Okay.
I got you.
All right. Thanks so much. All right, folks, we got to go. We're going to get out of here. Huge. It's huge. He just doesn't know how that word works, does he? I gotta laugh. Okay. We're going to be back with more tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll see you guys. Have a great day. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.